Hey there, mother Adam Welch here. Man, that sounds so much better when Grainy Days does it. I just sound like an asshole. Anyway, thanks for joining me here on another scorching hot day in Tennessee. It's getting insane. I've been ran inside again, out of the studio. Don't ever take air conditioning for granted, folks. But all that withstanding, it's going to be a good day anyway, because today is the day we're going to be reviewing this girl right here. This is Tamron's brand new 150 to 500 millimeter. It is their 150 to 500 millimeter f5.267. Here it comes. Di3 VC VXD. This one has a lot of buzz going on around it. I can understand why, and today we're going to talk about it. So yeah, folks, a little bit of backstory. I had actually originally intended to take this lens back out to the Pryor Mountains in Montana with me. I remember I'm working on my book of the wild Mustangs out there in the Pryors. Unfortunately, having a few issues with my puppy dog. Hopefully everything's going to be okay, but I don't need to be running around the country right now. All I have to say, I wish I had some more sexy sample pictures for you from those wild Mustangs, but had to stick around local. But I've got a ton of samples and we're going to be just fine. Now, first things first, guys. This is not a light lens. She's a girthy girl. Not overly so, and compared to some other lenses, it's not terrible. It's not laughably heavy. But if you have one problem with this lens, it's probably going to be the weight. It weighs in about 3.8 pounds, which, like I said, is not crazy when you compare that to a couple other lenses that Tamron 150 to 600 G2 that I reviewed a couple videos ago for Canon. That one weighs in at 70.9 ounces. So I think, what is that? Alexa, how many pounds is 70.9 ounces?
70.9 ounces is about 4 pounds 7 ounces.
4 pounds 7 ounces. And I'll also add that the 150 to 500 millimeter here, that weight is without the tripod collar on there. That's going to add about another 5.5 ounces. So when you have the tripod collar, the lens hood on, this lens is going to weigh in a little over 4.5 pounds for you. Speaking of the tripod collar, it is of course removable. I've shot this, oh man, yeah, I think I put it on a tripod one time for some panning, and I'll tell you about that here in a minute. But the collar is of course removable. It's always good, a lens this size, to have the collar on there if you have it on a tripod, because that way the lens is supporting your camera isn't supporting the lens. It's a lot easier on the lens bayonet. Tamron has added a few nice little features to this lens, I'm not going to lie to you, which I'm a psychopath like that, and I like the little things about a package. The first one is, with the lens hood, not only does it look really sleek with this new feature, but it adds a little bit of functionality. The perimeter of the lens hood has this nice tacky little rubberization. It doesn't slide around on hard surfaces so easy, and it's probably going to absorb some of the little bumps and scuffs that go along with actually using a lens like this in the field. The second thing, talking about rubberization, Tamron has added a little rubber perimeter to the front of the lens barrel too, just like the lens hood. It's going to absorb some impacts, and like I said, when you set it down on something, God forbid, face down like this without the lens cap on there, it's going to be a little bit easier on the lens having that little bit of cushion right there on the end. Walking around this girl again, it has Tamron's legendary weather sealing that I'm always going on and on about. It has a gasket here. It has sealing around all of these switches and sealings around all of the focusing ring and the zoom ring, all that kind of stuff. So if you throw a filter on the front of that, that should be technically fully weather sealed. Very smooth focusing ring back here. It almost feels like it's dampened just a little bit, almost like it's turning on its own. So if you manual focus quite a bit, that's going to be really, really good for you. Zoom ring, exact same thing. How much could you say about it? But there it is, fully extended. Does what a zoom ring does. And not extended, this thing is going to be 8.3 inches long. Fully extended there, it's going to be pushing about 12 inches or so total length without that lens hood on there. And speaking of zooming and all that jazz, this thing has something on there that I really want to show you. Of course, it has a lens lock, a traditional zoom lock. That way it's not going to drift when you're carrying it. But, and I've mentioned this with that 150 to 600 millimeter G2 that I reviewed, it has a little hidden feature. That is a mid-range zoom lock. What it does is allow you to lock the zoom in at any focal length. I love that. Like I said, I thought I broke the last lens before I realized that was a new feature Tamron had included. Just excellent. It's one of those small things that really goes a long way, especially if you're a wildlife photographer or if you're shooting sports and you want to maintain a certain focal length. You're getting up and you're moving. You don't have to worry about this thing moving in and out of the zoom range. All right, so the outside of this thing is a little busy, so let's talk about all these switches. Put the lens caps back on here. All right, starting over here at the left, you have the VC modes. This is Tamron's vibration control. If you're not familiar with this thing, I'll run you through it. You have 3 VC modes on here. The first one, VC1, that is your standard all-around vibration control. Don't quote me on this, guys, but I'm thinking it's somewhere around 4 or 5 stops of vibration compensation here. That's with the VC1. You switch it to VC2. That's what confuses people. VC2 is used primarily for panning. It's only going to stabilize in that one plane of motion because generally you're only going to be following an object on the horizontal plane. And the third mode, VC3, that is going to be the actual dedicated vibration control that kicks in at the time of capture. That means when you're looking through the lens with your camera, you're not going to see any reduction in the vibration or the shake. It's only going to happen as soon as you take the picture. They say there's a plus to that. I don't know, I guess it uses less energy, less on the lens, but yeah, you have that too. And if you don't want any vibration control, you can just switch that on and off with this little switch right here. Now I have a few short video clips showing you all the VC modes on here. The first one is going to be with 0 vibration control, so turned off. That's what this looks like. And the next is going to be VC mode 1. That's again the all-around vibration control. That's what it looks like. And here we have it in VC mode 2. That's used for panning. And I ended up not doing a VC mode 3 because you're not going to be able to see it in the video anyway because it only kicks in at the time of capture. Overall, especially at 500 millimeters, the VC on this, the vibration control, extraordinary. I always go on about Tamron's vibration control and the shake compensation. It works beautifully, and that's something that honestly you're going to probably want with this lens, especially if you're shooting handheld at that longer 500 millimeter focal length. Next, we have just the dedicated AF manual focus switch, just like that. Everybody knows what that is. But right next to that is going to be your focus selector switch. Now again, this can be kind of confusing if you're not used to using telephoto lenses such as this. All this allows you to do is select the distance ranges to where you want the autofocus to pick up, hypothetically. You have full, which is going to be autofocus throughout the focal length range. No matter how far away you are, it's going to pick up whatever the AF point is picking up with your camera and within the lens. You have an infinity to 3 meters. That means you're going to be picking up everything focused or infinity distance away up to 3 meters in front of you. That's what it's going to focus on, and it's not going to be picking up things that are within that 3 meter radius. So if you have somebody in front of you in a crowd, you're not going to be constantly getting confused with the AF of their head or something like that. And the other option you have is the infinity to 15 meters. Same thing as the infinity to 3 meters. You're just selecting further out of your autofocus range. So again, things that are closer to you, that's going to confuse the autofocus, it just allows you to move that out that much further to 15 meters. Very cool thing to have on a long lens. Something else really important to mention about this is the filter thread size. It's not small. It's not as big as that 150 to 600 millimeter, but this is an 82 millimeter filter thread size. The majority of Tamron's lenses, especially for Sony, are 67 millimeter filter thread size. This is an adapter ring. That is 67 millimeters compared to that. And now you have the 82 millimeter. The only downside, and the reason I do mention this, is because it does not have, the lens does not have a spot for a gel filter holder or drop-in filter holder on the back of the lens mount. So that means if you don't use, let's say, a square filter system like those KNF Concepts, kind of all-in-one filter systems that I reviewed a while back, filters for this might get a little pricey. 82 millimeters, that's a pretty big filter size. So yeah, if you switch them out a lot, if you use a lot of filters for your work, something to definitely think about, because you're going to be probably paying a little bit of money for that 82mm filter. So that is all the bells and whistles on the outside of this. I mentioned this is the VXD autofocus, something that I love going on about, because this lens and I believe, as far as I know, this lens and that 70 to 150mm f2.8 that I reviewed a while back, that Tamron for Sony, those are the only two VXD autofocus lenses in their lineup, and you can honestly really tell a difference, folks. Normally their autofocus is good anyway. They have the RXD autofocus in there, and this one has this one in that 70 to 150 that has that new VXD. I think it's voice, I can't remember what it means, voice activated voice activated autofocus. I'm sure I'll put it up on the screen, but it's insanely fast, it's insanely quiet, it's insane, it's very quiet. And I think that's what I really like about it, is the lack of noise. If you're a big wildlife photographer, that actually can come into play. Or, you know, if you're shooting inside, I don't know, a play or theater somewhere, you don't want a lot of noise, or a wedding, something like for normal people. And like I said, the accuracy and the lack of vibration in here, it's absolute dream autofocus system. I absolutely love it. Good for you, Tamron. So speaking of all that, let's jump over into Lightroom. Let me show you the image samples that I have with this. The sharpness, I feel like I say this a lot about some of these newer lenses. The sharpness is absolutely scary. The colors are scary. It's horrifying. Yeah, let's have a look. So here we are inside of Lightroom Classic, and you know the drill, guys, if you watched any of my reviews before. If you pay attention up here to the top left corner of the screen, just keep an eye on that. That's going to show you all the settings, the focal length, the ISO, everything you'll need to know about the images, in case I forget to tell you as we go. Of course, all of these are raw files. The only thing that I have adjusted with them is that after I've added them to the collection here, I've went in and made some small adjustments to the exposure, and I've auto-corrected the white balance across the board. That's it. No change in sharpness or contrast, anything like that. Really just the exposure and the white balance. So everything, for lack of a better word, should be raw right out of camera. Jumping right off the cliff here about that sharpness. Believe it or not, this is in a little community not far from my hometown here in West Tennessee. Just a random phone booth out in the middle of a guy's yard. I'm about 40 or 50 yards away from this. This is at 150mm, and if I just zoom in, let me bring up this so you can see how much I'm zooming in. So we're at 100% here. This is not zoomed in. Going into 100%, and you can already see the actual text of the stickers on this phone. Yeah, that's at 150mm. I've got one at 500mm, which gets insane, but you can already read it there. Excellent resolving power. This is at 1250 ISO, 1/2500th of a second. Can't stress enough, guys, if you're shooting telephoto lenses, you've got to bump up that shutter speed, because there's just no substitute for arresting motion that way. I don't care what anybody says, but anyway, I digress. So that's at 150mm. This is at, I know I have one at 500 somewhere, or do I? I think I just shifted that over. Well, apparently I didn't take any at 500. Here's one at 376. Sorry about that, folks. So zooming in again there to 300%. And you can read virtually all that text. Excellent sharpness, excellent resolving power right out of the gate. And you can't really discern it too much in this one, but look at that color. Beautiful raw, deep blues, got the green of the grass. These are some of my favorite images. I think it really shows the sharpness of this lens the best. This is right outside my house here. It just looks like you could jump in and touch the raindrops on these flowers. I'm actually thinking about making some cyanotypes out of these. It's just something about them. It's very painterly to me, kind of calming. This is at 500mm. The center, back that off to about 100%. The center is just beautifully sharp, contrast, absolutely beautiful. ISO 800, this is at f8. Something that I've noticed which can be said about a lot of lenses too, I suppose. The least sharp this lens get is at the extreme ends of the focal length. So I'm assuming you have some diffraction coming in. So at 150 millimeters, regardless, it seems like, of the aperture, or at 500 millimeters, regardless of the aperture, that's when you're going to get the most softening, at least at the edges. Yeah, look at that. Speaking of the edges, so keep in mind we're at 150 millimeter focal length, f6.3, zooming in here. You're starting to see a little softening there. No real distortion to speak of, and absolutely zero chromatic aberrations that I've seen, even at the wide open ends. But look at that. It's at 300%. You can actually see those little follicle, little hairs inside of that leaf. ISO 1000. And these are handheld, folks. Look at this center sharpness. Again, no sharpening applied whatsoever. This is at 300%. Even at these super high contrasted areas, no chromatic aberration. And of course, we're literally pixel peeping at this point. You're not going to be looking at these generally this close up. Nope. Squeeze off a few of Leia here. She was not happy. Alright, now these will be slightly blurry. Honestly, nothing to do with the lens. I was doing this test more or less to show you the difference between 150 millimeters and 500 millimeter focal length, essentially what this lens could reach out and get you. So these are at way below what I should be shooting in terms of shutter speed. Couldn't tell you how far away this dead tree was. At least 100 yards or more. It was up on this little rise. 1/400th of a second, again handheld. I had the VC mode 1 vibration compensation engaged, 150 millimeters, and it's still really not that bad. There's something that I do in these tests called the bug test, and I try to pick out little insects, and you actually can. This is at 150 millimeters. I'm going into 300%, and like I said, even handheld, not the sharpest thing in the world at 1/400th of a second. You can see these little minute dots. And those are insects flying around the tree there. Yeah, you can still pick them out from that far away. So 150 millimeters, yes, 150 millimeters. This is at 500 millimeters. You can see those little bugs flying around there. Like I said, a little shaky. You can see we've lost some of that that sharpness that we've seen in the other pictures. These are just the same ones. Color, again, very good. Contrast, seriously guys, look at the contrast on that. A little bird sitting here. This is at, again, fairly slow shutter speed for this this focal length of the lens, 500 millimeters, 1/250th of a second. And even there, you can see a little bit of sharpness beginning to fade just because of the slow shutter speed. But still, 300%, 100%, and then we have the fit, and it looks perfectly sharp. Kind of an interesting little set of pictures coming up here. This is where I was testing out the panning. These are vehicles on Interstate 40 here in Tennessee. They're going at least 70 miles an hour. Speed limit is 70. Most times people go 80 or 90. So these folks are moving. It's actually kind of giving me an idea for a little project, but I won't get into that. But this is zoomed in to 500 millimeters, 1/500th of a second. And this was in panning mode in the VC, so VC mode 2, handheld. I want to zoom in to 100%. And you can actually see the faces of the drivers. There's 300%. There's actually kind of a funny one here. Not that one. Maybe it's this guy here. Oh yeah, one thing though, look at the color on this. How vibrant that orange is. I saw that just earlier. I think one of these guys, there's no way that they could have saw me, but I think this is it. Huh, looking right at me. For what reason? Very well done on the vibration compensation for the VC2. Again, that is where it just stabilizes that one plane of movement for panning. Yeah, So if you're, especially a lot of races, if you're doing a lot of auto car races or even horse racing, anything where you're on a subject and you're moving along with them panning, I think this lens is going to work out just fine for you. At least no worse than any other telephoto, especially if you're at least a little bit skillful and are practiced in what you're doing. These next few shows you the color rendition of this very well. This is at Parker's Crossroad. It's a Civil War battlefield. This is actually one of the mass graves. 1/320th of a second, 183 millimeters f6.3. Again, this has just been adjusted for auto white balance here in Lightroom. Excellent colors, especially when you realize everything is more or less kicking off in green here with these green tones. Beautiful sharpness there again. Excellent contrast. And again, those colors, perfect. Something that you really sort of confused about, or not confused about, but I'm conflicted about, is how the bokeh is rendered in this. I know some people really love using telephotos for portraits, getting a really long lens on there and getting that background separation with your subject. I just don't know. This one, the bokeh, looks very, it's flat and it's creamy. You don't have, even in some of the busy areas of the picture, you don't have a lot of action going on, except in just a few pictures, which we'll get to here in the end in just a second. But with these, I think you can kind of see nothing to write home about with the bokeh, but definitely not unpleasant either. You see how there's just, there's a very busy background here, but like I said, there's just not a lot going on with it. It's just very flat blur. This is at 500 millimeters at the widest aperture at that focal length range, f6.7. 500 millimeters f6.7 actually renders a very shallow, extremely shallow depth of field. And here's the same bench at 150 millimeters. I shot this one here a little windway or breezeway because for whatever reason I thought it kind of looked like a television screen at the time. I don't know. I think I'm going crazy, which I probably am. These next two, and we're getting to the end, guys. I just want to make sure you get an idea of what this lens can do. These were both shot at that MOD, that minimum object distance at each focal length. This is at 150 millimeters. Very, very, very close. Like I said, roughly a foot away. If you watch those Instagram stories I'd put up a couple weeks ago, you really saw this being done live. So that is 150 millimeters. This was inside a little cabin. It was extremely dark. So we're shooting at 1/80th of a second. So that VC really working overtime. And you still got just plenty of sharpness going on here. Handheld. I was shooting this more or less like a waist level viewfinder, so I had it suspended from the strap, putting a little bit of tension on there to help stabilize as much as I could. And now we have 1/80th of a second again, but this time at 500 millimeters. This was stepped back, like I said, roughly around 6 feet. You get a little bit of blur in there, but that is literally motion effect and camera shake on my part. There's just not a whole lot to do about that when you're shooting those slow shutter speeds. And speaking of that, here's another example of what your shutter speed can do for you in terms of sharpness. If you're not afraid to bump up the ISO just a little bit, this is at 1/1250th of a second. ISO 1600 f5.6, just over 300 millimeters. Some bamboo growing out here. Excellent sharpness. Again, there's just no substitution for having a faster shutter speed in terms of getting rid of that camera shake. A few more here to show you the sharpness. And this little bamboo forest was just randomly out there. Zoom in one more time. And we're getting to the last three or four pictures here in the set. Well, one's just kind of a burner frame. This was actually shot through my back window. It's just a hawk that happens to haunt my backyard here. Just kind of fired it off. No real reason. But these I wanted to show you because this demonstrates what I was talking about, that kind of anomalous bokeh we saw on those other photos where the bokeh is, like I said, not unpleasant, but it's very flat. There's not a lot of action going on here. A little cardinal out here standing guard at the fence. We're at 500 millimeters, 1/640th of a second, f6.7, again the widest aperture you can get at that focal length. Look at this. It's very busy back there. And I think it's just something going on geometrically here. I think these leaves are maybe really close, or closer to the camera than it appears. But I love that. It has a very, I usually bring this into something to compare when I really love the bokeh, but it has a very Helios type effect, a very geometric effect to it. A lot of action going on there, and even back here with these leaves, I don't know, it just looks a lot better to me. But like I said, and it's in all of these here. I think it's, like I said, it must be something to do with the geometrics and the optics. But here, I can just picture a model, or anybody else, a portrait, someone standing back against a background this busy with those leaves. That would be absolutely beautiful at 500 millimeters. So that's why I was saying I'm a little conflicted on recommending this as a portrait lens. If that was based on some of the other bokeh, probably not so much. But with this, yeah, I would think so. I think it's of course a matter of personal taste. But yeah, there's that. So take from these pictures what you will. Okay guys, that's been about 60 pictures or so. I hope you've got an idea of the sharpness, all the performance issues, and the capabilities of the lens. So let's wrap this thing up. All right folks, just to recap what we've been talking about here. Again, the 150 to 500 millimeter f5.67, Tamron's new Sony full frame mirrorless lens. Comparing this to some other lens options out there, I want to get that to you. Sony has two native lenses that are more or less in this same category. The first one is the FE 100 to 400 millimeter f4.5.56 G Master, the GM OSS E mount lens. That's a mouthful. Again, 100 to 400 millimeter. It's about the same size as this one. This one's, like I said, is about 8.3 inches long, and that lens is going to be actually, yeah, almost exactly the same. It's 8.07 inches long. That's the 100 to 400. It has a more economical filter thread size, 77 millimeters, whereas the Tamron is 82 millimeters. Weight, there again, it's a little bit lighter. I think that one, the 100 to 400 is going to be coming in under the 3.8 ounces. I think this one's like 3.1 ounces. But the price, and we'll get into the price of this here in a second, the price of that one is roughly 2,500 bucks right now. This is on Adorama. The other lens you can compare the 150 to 500 millimeter to is the Sony FE 200 to 600 millimeter f5.6 f6.3 G OSS E-mount lens. Man, insane names on some of these lenses. That one actually comes with a big filter too. That's a 95 millimeter, whereas this is 82. The weight on that one is going to be a lot more than the Tamron 150 to 500. That one is going to weigh, Alexa, how many pounds is 74.7 ounces?
74.7 ounces is about 4 pounds 11 ounces.
4 3/4 pounds thereabouts. So you'd be probably pushing over 5 with that one, where this one is going to be, like I said, 3.8 ounces. So trimming off a lot of weight going with the Tamron over that. Same thing with the length. That one, the 200 to 600 millimeter, is about 12.5 inches long, where this one is a little bit over 8 inches long. And the price right now on Adorama of that 200 to 600 millimeter Sony is going to be roughly about $2,000. So you're getting kind of comparable to the Tamron with that one, because the price right now, what is this, July 6th? No, July 7th, 2021. Right now on B&H, it's about 1,400 bucks. It's about $1,399. And just going across the board here, again, that was B&H. Adorama's the same thing, $13.99. Oh, I usually get all my stuff from Amazon. Let me put this on here, so how much it is on Amazon. Yeah, Amazon has got it for $13.99 too. So you're looking at 1,400 bucks for the Tamron 150 to 500 millimeter, and compare that to its closest cousin in the same range of everything considered. That's the Sony FE 200 to 600 millimeter f5.663. That one's going to be just under $2,000. So you have 1,400. And then your next best bet is still going to be about $600 more than the Tamron. Oh, something that I should have mentioned at the very beginning, folks, something that I really liked about this lens, I don't know why I forgot about it, It has an insanely close MOD, minimum object distance, or the minimal focusing distance, how close you can get to your subject and still be in focus. This thing is at the short end, at the 150 millimeter end, 23.6 inches MOD. I know that sounds like a lot, but think about it. The lens itself, roughly 8.5 inches long, 8.3 inches long. You measure the MOD from the front of the lens to the image sensor of whatever camera, so it'd be looking somewhere about right there. So that's at least 12 inches. That's what, 8? Well, might as well call that 3 inches or so. So that's about a foot. And what is 26? So you can 23. You can more or less get the front of the camera about a foot from your subject at 150 millimeters. You're getting close to macro-ish there. I think the magnification on this one is 1.3.1 on the wide end there. So for this lens, I don't know, I guess I wasn't expecting that close of MOD. And actually on the telephoto end is 70.9 inches MOD. So when you go all the way out to 500 millimeters, you can get within about 6 feet of your subject. Crazy. So final thoughts on this old girl here. I feel like I said a lot, like some of these other things. I don't know, I guess it's a sign of the times that we live in such amazing climate to be making pictures, because we have so much good glass floating around out there. Sharpness, superb, contrast, crazy. You saw the image samples, color, beautiful. And that VXD autofocus, man, I love it. I don't know. So yeah, $1,400 for the Tamron 150 to 500 for Sony. I think if you're looking for a lens for something in that focal range for your Sony cameras, your full frame Sony mirrorless cameras, and you're not the type of person who wants to adapt other lenses to your cameras, this just came out. So that price is probably only going to go down. I think it's a good deal now, honestly, for what you're getting. But like I said, the only thing that you need to keep in mind on this is actually two things I would keep in mind on that. One is the filter thread size. 82 millimeter filters for this one, so that could get a little pricey if you shoot a lot of different filters for whatever reason or another. The other is going to be the weight. Definitely didn't bother me, because most of my cameras are huge rigs anyway, so you know, I don't really mind the girth of the lens. But that being said, you know, it's not overly heavy, but it's definitely not light either. But if you're looking for a telephoto in this range, you're probably going to already be accepting that as a necessary evil anyway. That being said, I did some Instagram stories, and most people chimed in saying, Jesus, that is a huge lens. So yeah, if you don't want to carry a lot of weight around with you for whatever reason, just like I said, keep that in mind. I'm rambling about the weight. So that is it for the Tamron 150 to 500 millimeter f5.6.7 Di3 VC VXD. Something I was thinking about today, folks. If you want to chime in the comments, I've been considering reviewing some of my other workhorse lenses, not just the new lenses that I get in, especially from Tamron. I have a lot of old vintage film lenses. I have a lot of old vintage film lenses that I adapt to different cameras. I have a lot of just regular lenses for my digital cameras that I use a lot. Like I said, I shoot 35 millimeter, 135 format, medium format, and large format 4x5 film. Medium format, a lot of lenses for that. I have some really cool Soviet lenses for my 35 millimeters. Yeah, let me know if you'd want to see something like that. It's something that I never really considered doing, but I was talking to some folks, especially about some of these old Russian lenses, and they were very, very, very interested in them. And I'll share it all with you if you want to. Just let me know. And as always, folks, Camera Jockey Clothiers. I'm trying to get rid of even my affiliate links in here, but I'm definitely trying to dump these damn ads out of my videos. I always say, honestly, I don't like them any more than you do, but it makes me a few dollars and it helps offset some of the costs for this. So yeah, if you go over there, check out that stuff. Cool, weird t-shirts, fanny packs, stickers, cups, mugs, all kinds of stuff that people on here sell. It really does help me out, and I really do appreciate it. Thanks again for being here, everybody. I'm Adam Welch, and you know I can't end these videos. Jesus, it's hot.